Welcome to Starfleet Boy. Audience, please attend carefully. There are lots of spoilers for Star Trek in general. I must admit I am having coffee.
I don't have coffee.
So I am a little hyper. And we're back on another exciting episode of Starfleet Boy, a casual and informal conversation about Star Trek. Today we are focused on Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 7's, I think it's like episode 20. No, 19 or something, 19 or 20. We're
near the end. We're on the cusp of the end.
It's really so close. I can feel it. I can taste it. Now it's not the end of our journey on Starfleet Boy. That continues, but it's the end of our Next Generation discussion that we've been doing for 4 years.
Is it 4 years? Wow.
Doctor, we've been doing this.
Wow.
Oh, excuse me. That made me. That made me cough. Don't worry. I think it's just
some water.
Some coffee went down the wrong tube. Journey's End. Very interesting episode. Do you want to give the summary or should I?
You may give the summary.
I give 2 minutes to you and your
gallant crew.
How do you give the summary to this episode? Let's see. Humanity failed and did not do right by native peoples of the world, and so they had to go off-world to another planet and start all over, and they thought that they'd finally come.
Just one tribe. I don't think it's all of Native American culture, but just one tribe.
Oh yeah, this one tribe from the north. It was a North American.
Yeah, they're North American
tribe.
Yes.
Anyways, we failed them, so they had to leave Earth and find a new home, and then 200 years later, we find ourselves in the exact same situation. And what we do is pretty much, at least on paper, what we are ordered to do is pretty much the exact same thing that led these people to leave Earth and find a new home and start over. Is this kind of, I guess, I would say a fatigue of being subjugated constantly.
Indeed.
And ignored because you're inherently a peaceful peoples. Anyways, although that's not the case for all native tribes, but, you know, for the most part, there's like a live and let live type of attitude that proliferates among at least here in North America, I would say. I don't know if I know enough about this subject. We're gonna find out tonight. But anyways, we're threatening to do the same thing, and then while all that's happening, we have a oddly disgruntled Wesley, who's like not himself at all, who's just kind of being. There's a Spanish word for it. It's pesado. Right, like he's.
Yes.
I don't know what would be the word in English for what his attitude was. Just bad attitude, right?
He's just being an asshole, to be honest. Can I say that on Starfleet Boy?
Yeah, it's PG-13. It's fine. Anyways, he's being an asshole, and I didn't put my badge on. I took it off like Wesley. Well, there's this one that's always there, and
it's all right.
All right. And he's just being kind of like moody and whatnot, and so he's compelled, though, during a reception where he meets one of the Indians, as they're called, throughout the episode. What is the right Doctor? We've come since Next Generation. We don't say Indian, right? Like, is that?
I mean, you can say indigenous person.
Natives.
You can say Native American.
Native American.
But I know, indigenous person is something that I've heard people use recently.
I think First People.
Oh yes, yeah. There's also that term. Yes.
The First People.
First Nation. Yeah.
First People. First Nation. Right. Okay. Anyway, Wesley is captivated by one of the members of the tribe, who claims he's been waiting for him for 2 years, and then convinces him to go on a vision quest. So Wesley basically takes peyote or something similar to that, has a hallucination or dream about his father, and a transformative experience that causes him to realize that he no longer wants to be in Starfleet Academy, and that he wants to do something else. And so he goes down to the planet, and realizes, he's trying to wait. Why does he go back down to the planet?
No, he's
the second time around.
Well, because he resigns.
Oh, after the vision quest,
Starfleet.
Right? And then decides that he's going to go down to the planet. That's right. So he goes down to this planet, and then just when things are getting tense because the Cardassians are involved, and I forgot to mention in the summary that the Cardassians are involved. There's this whole thing about who gets what in a territorial negotiation, and so Wesley all of a sudden stops time and freezes time, and then the native person who the tribes member, I guess I should say, who convinces Wesley to go on this vision quest reveals himself to be the Traveler, and they go off on some kind of journey together, and then Wesley comes back, lets his mom and Captain Picard know that he's gonna just stay and live on this planet, and that's it. That's the end of Wesley's character. We never see him again, except for in a deleted scene in Star Trek Nemesis, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't remember. So we never saw him in Nemesis. No, I think we.
No,
did. And they're all sitting down.
I don't believe.
Remember
so.
the big. There's a shot.
I will have to go back and look. It's possible that you're right, but I believe it's a deleted scene that Wesley's in.
All right, I don't remember.
I might be mistaken.
Okay.
What did you think of the summary? Uninspired?
Much like this episode. No.
I have a lot of notes.
No. Well, there's a lot to. There's actually a lot to discuss
talk about
in this episode, and I would like to take some time during this discussion just to kind of deal with Wesley overall as a character and what his legacy is.
I agree. We should do that.
It's. I feel to a certain extent. I mean, this episode is I think the exception. But I feel that his character benefited greatly from having left being a regular occurring character. I feel every time he came back, he was more interesting, and I think the character, greatly benefited from the fact that he wasn't on screen all the time, and every time he returned, you could add more nuance to him, and I think they took some chances, especially with the episode where he was involved in the cover up at Starfleet Academy, and that storyline I thought was really daring in terms of taking a character that we'd gotten to know so well, and then this episode also I think is daring, is the idea that our expectations from the beginning, and the show certainly seemed to build up to this, is that Wesley was going to be great Starfleet, I don't know, engineer or captain or something in Starfleet, certainly. And then here he takes a left turn and goes in another direction, which I thought was really interesting.
I wondered when I was watching it if Will Wheaton wasn't resisting his fate to some degree, because I really felt that like there was just something really off about Wesley. I didn't, even when he discovers his real purpose, and he definitely changes, his attitude changes in that moment, and he goes back to his excited. There were a couple of things that I noticed, right? So like, whatever happened to Wesley to make him an asshole, we deserved, I think, to know. It just comes out of left field. It's not really explained, and in particular, the scene in engineering bothered me when he's, talking about how like this is the ship he grew up on. He spent a few of his formative years on. He developed, like, he put together jerry-rigged devices all the time, whether it's a tractor beam to like whatever it was. He was scrappy. And when Wesley's showing him the modifications he made to the I forget what it was, like something manifold or whatever, right? But when Geordi's showing that to him, and it just didn't seem realistic to me that like Wesley would forget how scrappy they are on the Enterprise. Of course, they're not going to have the latest parts. They've been out on a mission. They're not like going to a starbase as regularly. They're not at the Utopia Planitia space yards. So what I felt was, I felt they could have still had the resolution for this character without the angst. I think in that scene it would have been so delightful if like Wesley's true last moments were like spent cherishing his crewmates as he always does. In that scene, it would have the Wesley I expected, and I even remember now I understand why I felt off about it, but I even remember not liking this episode very much when I was a kid. It's because Wesley would have been like, Geordi, this is cool, but did you know that Dr. Fassbender created this blah, 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 and like tell Geordi excitedly about the better technology, not like critically like, you should know better, like, do you want my help or not? And so just now more than ever, I feel like it was a really wrong choice on the part of the showrunners, the showmakers, and even Will Wheaton to like portray Wesley this way. So it kind of like leaves me with a bad taste, because this is effectively the last time we don't ever see Wesley again. We may never see him again. He may not be in Picard. He could be out there going on his vision quest, so to speak, his real life vision quest. So who knows if we'll ever see him again. And I just felt like it was a disservice to the character, like him or not, annoying or not in his early years. I just don't think it rubbed me the wrong way that he didn't have a resolution with Geordi. He didn't spend time with Data. Like, if you're going to say goodbye well. And I don't think that his character got that. So I'm actually kind of pissed about it still.
Like I said, I feel his later appearances after he left the show as a regular, I think were actually really good, and he benefited greatly. I think this episode is the exception. I thought he was a little too sullen. I thought the exchange he had with Geordi that you were just talking about was, I was fine with it. I would have been fine with it if there had been a scene where he would have apologized. I felt that would certainly have been in character. The whole moody, grumpy teenager routine. I think it's a little late in the game for him to be like that. I think if you really look at how old he is, but nonetheless, people.
It's just age. Off. I didn't have time to do research, but I would really like to know. I'm sure there's something.
Well, the story is one that Ron Moore wanted to write he'd been wanting to write for a very long time. I did some reading, and Ron Moore actually had it was somewhat based on his life experience. He was in the Navy ROTC program when he was in high school, and so he kind of, from a very young age, he had the experience of being put on a certain track, and everyone was expecting him to go this way, and he was going to zig, and then at a certain point he realized he's not going to zig, he's going to zag. And I feel that and Ron Moore wanted to convey that idea to young people, that it's okay to, even if certain adults in your life have a certain expectation that you do this or you do that, you got to do what feels right for you, whatever is inside of you. And
that was the strong point that worked in this episode. I loved that we could, sorry to interrupt you, you can continue your point, but I loved the scene with Wesley and Beverly, the doctor, the scene where he's revealing what's been happening. And it's a beautiful, that part's just really well done, that little segment, and I think that speaks to the story. That probably comes from what you're talking about with Ron Moore's own experiences.
But I agree with you. I think the way he treated, especially with Geordi, who was a character that Wesley always had wonderful rapport with.
And respect.
Yeah.
And you don't see any of that in that scene. And it's like, I don't...
Well, you don't see an apology. If you'd seen a scene with apology, that scene would have worked better. Obviously you can have a, somebody can be in a crappy mood.
Did we miss the apology? No, right?
No, there was no apology.
Yeah, okay. There was no apology.
No, there was no apology. And as a matter of fact, there's really no farewell, aside from, he really doesn't bid farewell to anyone other than his mother and Picard, his adopted father, it's like for lack of a better word.
Yeah, like, I can't believe they couldn't pull everyone together to just be standing in the transporter room in the end scene. That just didn't make sense. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it certainly, there was
it's like how O'Brien just got Picard, although that's nice. You get the great Patrick Stewart to say goodbye to you. But that's all it is. But,
remember when Worf left, he had the honor guard as he was leaving.
He did, right?
Remember?
Yeah.
I mean, it's it was lackluster in that sense. I don't know if they were just trying to keep it intimate in the sense that it's really a family thing, and Crusher and Picard are his. I guess, Picard is really a surrogate father, but the rest of the crew were just as involved. Actually, Riker certainly, and
there was a scene that reminded me of another scene in the episode. What is the one where he the Starfleet Academy one called?
What the name of the episode is? I don't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember. It's like the first.
But I know which one you're talking about.
The first duty. I believe it's called the first duty or something like that. Or
yeah.
In that episode, you remarked at how Picard kind of takes on the role of father, but also husband, like a proxy or a surrogate, as you say.
Yes.
In that, and I saw a repeat, which I liked. That's one of the things I would definitely put in the column of this episode, is that we got another taste of that, where Beverly comes to Picard pleading for help in a way, and he's like, he gives once more, like, very sage and very sensible advice, and he's like, he has to want the help. We can't
that is so true.
It was like a really great scene, and she's just like very like she's comforted, but she's also, you could tell it was like a very mommy daddy, like husband wife, like, dynamic there, and she can only go to Jean-Luc for that. There's no one else. It's so perfect because it is a natural relationship, and it's very interesting how that's pulled off. And that was a scene where I thought the acting was there was so many great moments in this episode, so many beautiful acting moments, and I think that's what ultimately saves the episode for me. Is the performances, but there were a lot of things that I just, like, for example, in my notes, let's see here. There was a couple of questions like, so Starfleet. Okay, so before we get to that question, I just wanted to say another good thing. Love the Nechayev opening scene where she finally, she's been very formal all along the series run. And then she comes in, same thing, like, let's get down to business. And she softens and falls for the ploy, falls for Picard's diplomacy here. And she sits down, and it was a remarkable difference in the tone that we've always seen Nechayev in throughout the series. And it was a really beautiful, kind of like really nicely done scene. Nothing was like, too rushed or whatever. It just all felt like very natural. And there's that like touching moment when she says, "Thank you for making me feel welcome." And Jean-Luc is like, "Well, you're always welcome here." Like his whole thing is like, and he says it later on to, and I love this. It's like, the chief of the tribe is like, the elder or chief of the tribe is like, one must get to know their adversary. And Picard says, well, I hope, my biggest hope is that after this is finished, you will no longer see me as your adversary. So that's like a really neat thing. And again, another thing that I love is that it espouses friendship, which Star Trek, to me at its heart is about friendship. One of the main, core tenets of Star Trek is friendship and showing what that means. And I love that those things are there. What I don't understand is, and this is where I think things start changing, because Star Trek does this like pretty much after this, it's like that's the modus operandi for Star Trek, in my opinion, is that there's no real explanation as to why the Federation Council would do this again. It's a clearly heartless act. It has a lot of weight and meaning on Earth, and like Nechayev even says, well, I've run it through, like, she's like, I tried the same arguments. She's on Picard's side. She's like, I made the same arguments you're making. The council said no. What could be, so then tell us what the strategic advantage, what is the trade-off? Like, show it to us, like, make us kind of understand, right? But I think here, maybe it's intentional as a way to show, again, parallels to our reality, right? Because since things have gotten subtler and more nuanced, but we are still doing the same things today to indigenous and native peoples that we've always been doing. So on that level, I could see why the Federation Council has to be portrayed as this like bad guy. But people start saying, oh, I hate new Star Trek because it's portraying the Federation as dystopian and it's not making the right decisions, and they make bad decisions. But here in Star Trek Next Generation, in season 7, I see it and I'm like, okay, why do we get that two-dimensional, why are we villainizing Starfleet and the Federation? Why can't we get,
No, I don't think, I wouldn't call it villainizing. And it's interesting that I listened to Trek on the Tube season 1 review of Picard, and there's someone who commented on his review, really went to town on other people saying, oh, the utopian view. And this commenter was saying, the utopian view is crap. It never happened. Rewatch Deep Space Nine. Rewatch Next Generation. And I think this episode is one of the examples that the commenter used.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. The answer is twofold. Number one is that they're laying down groundwork for Voyager in this episode, which is the Maquis. I'm sorry, I said Maquis, right? Yeah, Maquis. The Maquis, and then the idea that they're going against the Federation because they got left behind on the other side of the Cardassian border, and that's going to be the catalyst for some of the characters in Voyager. And as a matter of fact, the fact that we're dealing with a planet inhabited by Native Americans, this was supposed to have been Chakotay's homeworld that we see here. it was stated in the material.
I would have loved Roberto Beltran to play the character that turns into the Traveler. Although I like the actor who did it, but it would have been neat if Robert Beltran was in this as that character. One of those, like, you know, weird, like, who the Traveler model himself after.
Oh, okay. I was going to say that's confusing because you're saying that you wanted Chakotay to be the Traveler. I didn't understand that.
No, I just would have liked the Traveler to have modeled himself after Chakotay. It would have been an interesting twist. You know, just like
that would have been
like
confusing, though. I just
like Paris, just like Tom Paris's.
Well, yeah, sure.
Is it Locarno? Is it Paris? Who is it? Who's the guy? Yeah. Sorry, I keep interrupting.
And then the other thing is I feel that the questions that you're asking are certainly legitimate questions, and these are questions that, in light of Picard, the show, these are actually questions that come up in that show. If you think about it, in the backstory of what Picard did.
Well,
Picard,
it goes further. I mean, this theme, it's not the first time we've seen it on Star Trek: The Next Generation, but it's so important to the show that it comes up in Insurrection. And again, it essentially this thing about, like, you know, the other and displacing people and, like, you know, treating some people lesser is at the heart of Picard. You're absolutely right.
Now the novel that I read, that was the I guess you want to call it the prequel to the series. I know that, you know, novels are not canon, whatever, but I mean, certainly this novel is meant to inform the reader to backstory, you know, in relation to the show. There's a lot of Federation Council politics, and I feel that the same politics that led to the decisions in Picard led to the decisions here that we see here. You know, you're saying, you know, why would the Earth allow this on stuff? But remember, there's a lot of different interests.
Not the Earth. Well, yeah, like, you're right. The council's made up of many members, of course.
It's many members. So many members have many different agendas, and things fall by the wayside, and
but it's like a Saving Private Ryan moment. Like, I can't imagine the collective species of the Federation, the collective representatives of the Federation, would look at this situation and not go, oh shit, well, we might as well lose the dilithium planet because we can't possibly do this to these people again. You know, like, it just I don't know what that accent was, by the way. There might have been a
reason why maybe there's a reason the Cardassians really wanted that planet, and they had to give, who knows what they had to give in order to get that.
I guess that's just what I'm saying, is that I feel I would have liked to have been a little bit more invested in, because the whole time I was against Starfleet and the Federation, and I guess what I'm saying is I would have liked to have been a little more invested in the choices of the Federation, and that would have been cool, is to be supportive if the episode, like, made me feel supportive and then change my mind in the middle of the episode and realize, oh no, that's still wrong. Like, that's what I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is
and I agree with
it would have been neat to go on that journey. You know, instead we get this, like, black and white or binary, I would say, like, more of a binary situation than I think this episode perhaps deserved. And not just here, but again with Wesley too. Wesley was very, you know, unnuanced as well, and the whole, like, surprise of the Traveler, like in the very emotional scene with his mom, she out of nowhere mentions she remembers that the Traveler said he was destined for something, and I just thought that's oddly convenient that she would remember. Why would she remember that? And I even thought, Doctor, that, like, because we've talked about this before, that Beverly might be tuned into something else because she, in fact, in the bubble, you know, in that bubble universe episode. So yeah, I guess there's ways we can, but it's just weird. It's odd that, like, her prediction comes true. I don't know, it's just very odd. The episode just was so odd to me. I don't know why.
Well, I feel,
and I love, you know, and you know me, I'm, like, ready to give the 10s
right.
It's not like I'm not ready.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I feel that the structure. I feel, and this has been my issues with a number of prior episodes. Most of the prior episodes is that there's an A and a B plot that are at war with each other, and either one suffers or both suffer. And I think this was a situation where both the A and the B plot suffered. Both of them really demanded more time, because just as you're asking we're both asking questions about, we would have liked to have seen more in terms of the negotiations. Why did the Cardassians want this planet so bad? All this stuff. But there just wasn't enough time in the episode, because you've got to cut back to the Wesley story, which the Wesley story deserved to have more time, because think about it, the things that we didn't get an apology scene, between him and Geordi. There were other. Look at how he even treated Data like crap. I think
this was a two-parter that was squished into one part.
I think both stories could have stood on their own.
As
episodes. They didn't need to be put together. You could certainly have had another situation where at the end Crusher says, okay, well, I'm leaving, and the Traveler reveals himself somehow. That could easily have been added to some other minor thing. And then the plot with the Native American planet, I think that would have been a whole story. If you think about the story that was in this very season, where Worf's adopted brother was moving the.
I thought of that same episode here.
They're very similar.
I think if you combine this episode and that episode, you have like insurrection kind of forming. More or less. It's interesting.
Right.
That
Insurrection is a whole movie. Insurrection is a whole movie with very similar story and themes, and it got a whole movie. And yet this one, it seemed to get, short shrift, and it's just kind of like, yeah, you're over here. So I think that they end up kind of torpedoing each other. And neither of the two plots really live up to the full potential, and I think it's really a great loss to the Wesley character, because he did deserve to have a better send off than he got here.
Another thing that was interesting was the actor who played Anthwara, the elder.
He was in the original show. Yeah.
And on Voyager, he plays Chakotay's grandfather in a vision, I think, or something like that. Or Navajo grandfather is what he's credited as. No, sorry, that's another thing that he's credited as. That on Voyager, he was Chakotay's great grandfather in the episode The Fight. And then on the original series, he was on the episode Krell, and I don't remember that episode.
He played a Klingon.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, apparently, yeah.
But Ned Romero's pretty interesting, because aside from that, he's like, of course, he's been cast as a Native American like multiple times, but he was in the TV series Shane, which is a really good series from the 60s that I remember watching on TV. And then he was also in, let's see here, Ironside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he played a cop.
Another great. And then let's see what else. That was something else that I recognized, and then that's not it. But he has a ton of things, and he died in 2017.
Oh wow!
But I wanted to bring him up because I thought he was a very powerful performer and a powerful scene partner to Patrick Stewart. I thought he brought something out very interesting in Patrick Stewart, and in particular, the scene where he reveals to Jean-Luc that 700 years ago, Pierre Picard was in this one little, this one battle which was ruthless, and they used awful tactics and things like that. The way it plays is such a great, it's so well done. Like Picard's like truly trying his hardest to grasp like what that has to do with now and this situation, because rightly he is a person who doesn't believe that he should answer for his for the at least not for something that someone in his family did 700 years ago. He thinks that by now that would have been answered for already, and likely it was answered for. I can't imagine the Picards just buried that under the Picard rug, but it could happen. I mean, like a lot of families do that. But anyways, I just love the way he's like, I don't know that event, and I frankly don't see what it has to do with what's happening right now. And I just thought he was caught off guard in such a magnificent way. And Patrick Stewart really shows that like vulnerability and like, because he's trying so hard to do right by these people, but he can't. He's like his hands are tied in every direction, you know. And then on top of that, now he has this stain of blood that he has to like, you know, like somehow he has to like, and it weighs on him, because later in the episode he even says, is there going to be another dark page in the history of the Picards by the decisions that I make, you know, right here? And I just thought that's the kind of stuff that I thought like worked really well. And it also like I thought was very powerful, because later on, and even through until, you know, Star Trek Picard, we really get this sense of the Picard family and his like the importance of it and things like that, especially, you know, in the films. So I like that setup. And but I did think that that the tribe was awfully what's the word? I guess the stereotypes were loud is the only thing I could think of. It's just like one thing that I thought, which connects this episode to a really bad episode in season 1, agreed to be really terrible, is the one where Tasha goes to the plant, you know, with Lutan.
Code of Honor, I think, yeah.
Code of Honor, thank you. And they say that like the characterizations are so stereotypical, they some people say they're just racist, right? And I think that like in some ways that we see the same thing here. I would have loved, and I don't know if Star Trek ever did this or corrected it in Star Trek Voyager with Chakotay, because I haven't gotten too far into it, but I just would have loved to have seen there's one thing about preserving a culture, but I think like 700 years later we can't imagine what Native people's culture would be like, so let's get a little funky. And there were hints of it in the peyote room where Wesley mentions, oh look, that looks like a Klingon mask, and he starts to suggest, and I love that. I think that to me was like really great, where he's like, you know, for us, like the Ferengi, the Romulans, like all Klingons, they're all part of this like spiritual oneness, which is, you know, like this like one thing. Like he even says there's no difference on the spiritual level. So I think that like it would have been cool if like we saw them evolve even further, like if future you know, if the culture could be preserved but without the like cheesy stereotypes, in other words, you know, like that would have been a really neat kind of thing, you know. So although I'm glad they didn't have any drunk Native Americans on the streets or any of those kinds of stereotypes, you know,
that,
like,
no, obviously no, you're not going to have that.
But
no. Well, I don't know. I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. I'll
go even further. What it is that yes, there is a Native peoples do have a connectedness to the environment, to the land, but it always seems to be portrayed with in characterization as them being simple or naive or like somehow not sophisticated enough to understand the other world, right? Like, and that's specifically what I'm targeting here, because you know, I worked at the Apple Store. The son of the Mikasuki chief came in and bought a very he's on TikTok, he's on the internet, he's on YouTube. Like, there's you know, when he came into the Apple Store, he wasn't wearing like, you know, handmade robes and you know and like shawls. He came in wearing jeans and like a, you know, like a nice top, you know what I mean, like, and sneakers. And so that's what I want. If that's what we have today, if that's what a real Native person is like, I would like to see that portrayed on screen as a future person. There should be really no difference. I get like having like, you know, certain traditions being, you know, extended on into the future, but it's just over the top in my opinion, and that kind of like came through.
I totally get what you're saying.
That was a lot. I know you're like, whoa, that was a lot. Starfleet Boy just like really got on that soapbox.
No, and I feel that if this had been an episode, it would have been wonderful to have had an entire episode where we really would have gotten to know this planet. And we have had other episodes where we get to know the culture of the planet, and that's obviously part of the story. I mean, you just mentioned Code of Honor, which was a terrible episode, but it did a better job of showing us what that planet was like, and that was kind of, you know, the point is to show us, you know, what the people are like, and, you know, you set up some kind of scenario where we're in conflict with the morals of the planet, whatever, all that stuff. We could have had an episode like that, and I feel that what this episode lacks is, you know, it was an opportunity to have Native American characters on Star Trek, and yet they really weren't allowed to live very, very much. They weren't very vibrant, and even the main character, I forgot what his name, the chief of the
Antwara, I think. Yeah.
Okay, he obviously had the best part in the episode, but he was only really featured in like a couple of negotiating scenes, and then that talk with Picard in 10 Forward. There was, you know, there was an opportunity here to have had more three-dimensional characters for sure, and I also found it to be very lacking. It was a missed opportunity. And I wish that they had taken the opportunity to create, you know, more memorable characters and like you said. So I think it all boils down to
Sorry, go finish your thought.
No, I'm just saying it all boils down to the fact that these are two stories that should have been allowed to breathe in their own episodes and not be smashed together in one. Both stories lost.
What didn't lose was Gulliver, who has been on all the Star Treks. He's. I thought
that's right.
This was
he's
cool.
on. Well, no, he's not on Enterprise.
Yes. Oh yeah, sorry, Yeah, sorry, not all the Star Treks, but you know what I'm talking about. All the future.
Oh, okay.
All the future Star Treks.
Okay, all right. I'm watching.
You know, I have a compartment for prequels. It's as far as I'm concerned, Star Trek Enterprise. It's Star Trek.
It's
Discovery.
too early to have that discussion. We're not there yet. Go ahead.
Star Trek Enterprise, Star Trek Discovery season 1 and 2, and the Kelvin films are all in one compartment. As far as I'm concerned.
So the Gaul was on the Voyager pilot, yes, right?
He was in a couple, maybe 2 or 3 episodes of Deep Space Nine, and then
he's in several episodes of Deep Space Nine. Yeah,
and then he's in this episode, and he'll be back. What is that episode called? It's like 3 or 4 episodes away.
Ensign Rowe, yeah.
Right, I think.
Yeah, whatever. It's
Preemptive Strike. I think it's called that.
Preemptive Strike. Okay, all right.
I think it is. Yeah. Okay. So he'll be back again. I liked his character. I really loved that we got that moment. He's very difficult throughout the whole episodes, as he should be, because they do have a stake on this, you know, planet and so on. But that last moment when he's pushed to like press the button, so to speak, and he, you know, has that moment where he reveals that he lost 2 children in the previous war, and he doesn't want to lose the third, and that was a touching moment. So I like that. But again, I agree with your point. Squished together, there's a deficit because we could have spent a lot more time getting to know Gulliver and fleshed his character out even further, because also he you know, as I think this episode, as far as performances are concerned, is like all the performances I would rate highly. I would say like they're up there, because there's some, again, even Picard pleading with Gulliver in that scene in the ready room where he's caught off guard, like they're having some kind of discussion, and Worf is like, Captain, the situation's getting worse, what do we do? And he's like, stand by, Commander Worf, and he turns immediately to Vec and he's like, just beam him out. Like what it's easy, there's a hostile situation going on, beam your guys out, situation done, right? And Vec is like, no, it's
like, our planet. Yeah.
It's our planet. Like, what
I'm
are you talking about?
Right.
Exactly. And so,
right.
But that little scene there, it sets up nicely the later scene where he says no, because he's fighting Picard in this scene, and he like, where he agrees with Picard later at the end. And I like, again, but that's all living in the performances. I just think they like really knocked it out of the park as far as the performances were going. And even like, again, Wesley, when he finally does come and talk to his mother, I thought that scene was beautifully acted by Will Wheaton. I just didn't think the earlier scenes were. I didn't get the asshole Wesley. I loved the compassionate Wesley that we get later. And then the stuff with the Traveler, it's like, okay, great, this is the Traveler, and literally they walk away out of frame.
Right.
If you're not paying attention, you think that's it, Wesley. If you don't see the scene at the end in the transporter for some reason, you think, which I did think, because I forgot the scene at the end. Because again, there's no pomp and circumstance to saying goodbye to this character. There's not a more memorable scene. So if you don't see anything, you're just like, Wesley walked off with the Traveler, and that was it.
Oh,
like
that was it. Yeah.
They're going on the Rainbow Bridge. the Bifrost. The Bifrost came and picked them up. I don't know what else to say about that scene. It was just like, so weird. It's like there's this whole investment of Wesley like intervening on behalf of these people, and like, taking the badge off and resigning his commission and leaving Starfleet Academy for these people. And in the moment when there's this conflict going on, where he freezes time,
right?
That's it. It fizzles. He's like, trust them to make the right decisions. Let's go off on this side quest. I don't know where they went.
Right.
More peyote, and like, it's so strange. It's just such a strange scene. Mom, I did drugs and I saw Dad, and I'm not going to be in Starfleet anymore, is basically what it boils down to.
Right.
You didn't expect.
No. I just noticed. Yeah, I usually. Okay, there we go. Okay,
what is it that happened?
Technical error. That it was a little thing on my computer. Hopefully, I didn't freeze. I wasn't sure if I froze or not. I wasn't sure if I became Wesley and froze time and walked off with the Traveler. Yeah, that ending just comes out of kind of out of nowhere, and it would have been wonderful if somehow the Traveler arriving on the scene, right? And Wesley having the power to stop time would have somehow been more relevant, because what happens is that scene happens, right? But then the next scene that we get is they cut back to the Enterprise, right? And Picard is ripping him a new one, and and as the scene is playing, right?
You're confused. See, that confused me too. That scene takes place after Picard rips him a new one. The Traveler's like, trust them to make the right decision. And,
does it?
Oh, you just froze. Yeah. The Traveler's like, trust them to make the right decision. Then we go back to the Enterprise, and it's the scene on the bridge where Gul ultimately decides not to escalate the situation, and he orders his people to transport out.
Oh, you're correct. You're absolutely correct. Yeah. Okay.
But that's what I'm saying. It's just that there's no, there's a discontinuity because
Right.
it doesn't
But
like
wouldn't it have been wonderful if he had stopped time, right? And then we could have dealt with the fallout. Like, people would have been saying, Wesley, you stopped time. How did you do that? You know what I'm saying? Like, it had the
well,
act
here's where you needed a
had
two-parter.
no consequence, really.
Right.
Like,
What I would have
nobody
liked-
really knew he did that, right? He didn't tell Picard, hey, I stopped time. Like, he didn't do anything. Like, and it didn't help.
Right.
It was just to show that the Traveler was there. And then, like you said, they walk off camera. It was
What would have been better is, instead of them walking off camera, what if like the scene had transitioned to like some sort of like, we go on that journey with Wesley on they obviously did, because Wesley does come back to the ship afterwards to say goodbye, and decides to live on the planet. But what if we saw the journey? Like, there must have been something really profound that the Traveler showed Wesley. He even says few humans will think like you do or evolve as you have. Q is always threatened by humans. There could have been so many interesting like connections here.
Yeah,
we could have found out that the Q are not the only kids on the block. The Traveler could have revealed not everything about what he is and who he is, but a little bit more about what the nature of the Traveler is, what the purpose of the Traveler is. And there's
we didn't get it.
We didn't get it.
We didn't get it. I was reading in the magazine, and I believe it was Jerry Taylor who said that it was a very conscious decision to write the need to write Wesley off, because they knew that he was not going to be a part of the movies. And reading that sentence today, I found it kind of remarkable. I was thinking to myself, he could have. I mean, let's say the Traveler had never come back. Let's say none of all. He could have been a guy. He could have been one of the guys at helm. It would have been an easy thing. It was,
or just to mention that he's at serving on a starbase, and he gives him a helping hand, like how Kirk like the way Kirk calls Sulu for help.
Yeah.
There could have been something. Wesley, yeah, it is. You're right. It is
it's
remarkable.
They just wrote him off.
That
just like, that's it. No movies.
Well, that they were
you.
just like, this is it.
Right.
There is something like really weird about that. I just think, Wesley didn't get a great ending. I think he actually. Right. I don't know if it's too late. That's a question I have for you. Is it too late? Can Wesley?
Well, before I answer that question, I just want to briefly discuss the legacy of Wesley.
Of Wesley Crusher.
In terms of not just as a character, but the cast of characters that we see in Star Trek The Next Generation, to me, represents the final vision of Gene Roddenberry. To be fair, this
very
is
true. Yeah,
this is the cast of characters that he envisioned, the final cast of characters for Star Trek that he had a chance to do. Okay, and I feel that a lot of what he saw Star Trek, the direction Star Trek needed to go, was in those characters. And certainly Wesley was one of those characters. And I think I think Roddenberry, at the point, in the 80s, after he'd done all those pilots, and he'd seen the direction television was going, and he'd seen how Trek fandom was really saved in syndication, with young people watching the show. Young people watching the show in syndication. That's when it really became it became super popular. I think it was a very conscious decision on his part to have a young person as a part of the cast. The original series did not have young people in the cast. It was if you think about it, the original show was not conceptualized to be a kids show. It was aimed at adults. But with Next Generation, he broadened the appeal, and he broadened the audience, and he wanted to bring in families, and having a young character in that cast, I think, was very important to him, and he felt that the success of Star Trek needed to have that. And really, I'm surprised that, with the exception of Deep Space Nine, we really don't have any other Star Trek show.
Elnor.
Elnor is
He's like Wesley's age.
Is he?
Yeah, he's young. Well, he's a kid in Picard.
He's 15?
And then later... No, he's probably like 18 or 19. Sorry. He's like Wesley's age here. He's like probably...
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to debate... Because, to be fair, Elnor is hardly a character, and he's hardly a young character that young people can relate to, because he's chopping heads off of people. So, but
I agree. Okay,
so,
never.
and actually, it speaks directly to my surprise
point that you're making.
To the point I'm making is that Star Trek was meant to. I think Roddenberry's vision was it was meant to be a program that families could watch together, and I welcome the people who currently make Star Trek to learn that wisdom that Roddenberry had, because I don't think the current shows, as they are family view, are meant for family.
They're not family viewing, but
right.
I
feel that's a mistake.
I appeal to this, which is I think that everyone's just afraid to pull the trigger on the next Star Trek show. Everything's been a spin-off. Everything's been a side quest. Even Picard is, at best it's an epilogue to the Next Generation, and I think it's going to do a great job at it. But where is the show? Where's the show? Where's Star Trek? No subtitles. Just
because there hasn't been a success yet. There hasn't been that success.
The whole thing is for that to be, TNG didn't start off as a guaranteed success. It was,
right. It became a huge success.
It became a huge success because it was fresh and new, right, and also served that core principle of exploration and wonder and science and reason winning the day, and like what you said, appealing to a broader audience, like having lessons, like having morality sprinkled all over it, like all these things. That's not a show that exists right now, and people argue that TV doesn't do that anymore. Well, I argue it can. I argue that it can. I mean, where I get that kind of inspiration from nowadays? Watching shows like Cosmos, but it only gives me hints of it. And ironically, that's Brandon Braga, I think, produces that with Seth MacFarlane and so forth. And I have to admit, I don't like to talk about the Orville, but the Orville satisfies a little bit of that kind of thing, even though it's a nostalgia play essentially of TNG. I think that the Orville shows that the success of the Orville and the kind of the vehemence behind the fandom of the Orville, and a lot of people call it the other Star Trek or the real Star Trek or whatever some people are saying on the internet about it. But to me, that's a testament of the hunger that's out there. Everybody has a hungry heart for that Star Trek, and I knew I'd do it. I knew at one point. I knew that at some point I would make you laugh.
The song just went directly into my head.
Everybody's got a hungry heart.
Oh God. Bringing it back to the episode.
Are you not a fan of the boss?
No, I loathe the boss. I can't stand him.
Really?
Yeah, I can't.
Oh, that's a discussion for another day. Okay, go
on. To conclude, I think we should conclude
that.
To conclude, there was a lot of missed opportunities in this episode Maybe I don't know. Maybe, I mean, there's certainly other episodes in this season I could have done without, and we could have split these two stories up and let them breathe in their own spaces. I'm glad that they at least attempted to bring some resolution to the Wesley character. But in answer to your question, as soon as this episode was over, I found myself imagining season 3. Okay, season 3 of Picard, not season 2. Season 3 of Picard, because I think they've said that they want to do 3 seasons and be done.
I think Sir Patrick Stewart said like that's probably as much as he's got to tell.
Right. I think a return of Wesley would have to happen in the whatever final season Picard has, because it should really. I would like to see this surrogate family reunited for the end, because really I know that Picard's had a lot of surrogate sons in one way or another, but
Wesley
is his surrogate son.
I would even just go as far as to say that Wesley is his son, like in every sense other than the biological sense. He's like a stepfather almost to Picard. And, but I guess you're right. Technically, he's a surrogate, but still. But,
right. No, that's what I mean.
There is deep...
there's deep...
Yeah, there's deep caring, and you do see it. So, again, we got that... We that was the other thing that I didn't like about this episode, is that Wesley was already dressed down in the episode, where he says the first duty of, and we have another scene here where there's an opportunity. I think that scene fell flat for me because, Picard once again has to dress down Wesley and put him in his place and and then Wesley, like, I kind of liked where it was going, where what he says, and it's really well performed, of like, even though the council, he goes, I know you have your orders from, the Admiral, and I know that she has her orders from the council, it's still wrong.
And he says so, yeah.
I think that what was terrible about this scene is that Picard actually does agree with Wesley. Like, that's evident from the beginning of this, the whole time and there's a moment where Picard can have compassion and just say, you're right, but I don't know what to do. Like a vulnerability, like you would a father to their son.
But he's not being a father, he's being a captain.
But when Wesley takes the badge off, there's no need for the formality any longer.
But that takes him off guard. Remember, no one expected
it does, but
Wesley.
Then that's this is true, but it could have been, I think that could have gone deeper if it was just that, like what you said, if it was just an episode devoted to this, they could have taken the time to kind of further develop the scene, maybe play with it and see where it went. Yeah. But I don't think that it went there. So that was another disappointment of mine. Yeah. Great performances by both. I think Will Wheaton's giving his all in a lot of scenes in this episode. I mean, like, especially with against Gates McFadden, against Patrick Stewart here. Mm-hmm. But it just feels like a little all over the place and kind of blotched together. And that's the note I wanted to say. I think that was the only other thing on my notes that I had to say. Before we give our ratings, Doctor, I would like to know if you have anything in the book or in Joshua Chapman.
No, because there's no aliens.
Oh, that's right. Well, technically they're not aliens, so you're right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just yawned.
I would like to say that in furthering my thinking of season 3 for Picard is, wouldn't it be interesting? And I do advocate for a final ending to Picard as a character. However, if, and even though we've already gotten this Gollum sleeve or whatever he's in right now, extended his life a bit, wouldn't it be interesting if for the final episode of Picard, it is Wesley who somehow Picard is he's that's it, he's got to go. Wesley offers him a chance to continue non-corporeally to explore the universe.
I love that. How about this ending? Because I love that though. But how about this ending? Because I think this would be interesting too. Well, no, forget it. That doesn't work. But if Wesley had stayed in Starfleet, imagine the kind of drive he would have created. Imagine if he created a hyperdimensional drive or something that could propel a ship so far that, like combining that intuition, that Mozart, understanding of the universe and mathematics and physics, and putting it into action to further technology along. And we have just in the same way that we revere Zefram Cochrane, future Star Treks will revere Wesley Crusher as the one who took them even further into space travel, to new dimensions of space travel, if you will.
You open up one last door, which is
speaking of nice connection to the episode of Opening Doors. Very good, well done.
One last thing to discuss, because Nemesis, in whether deleted or not, they do feature Wesley Crusher, in uniform, which I totally understand why they did that. I know why the movie did that, but the implication is that he is back in Starfleet. Now, I ask you, what do you think? Because if we don't have the deleted scene, then Wesley's journey ends as we see in this episode. He's out there with the Traveler. But if we take Nemesis, the deleted scene, as canon, then we have to say that he returns.
There's a technicality. There's a technicality because is Wesley's status veteran? Because he did serve, and if you're a veteran, you get to keep your uniforms and you get to dress up in dress uniform because you were once, a member of this organization. So I could see him being a non-ranking. He could be wearing I'd have to study the scene. I honestly don't remember it that well. But if he has his rank pips, for example, that would indicate that, yes, he is an active member of Starfleet. But if the uniform is being worn without rank pips, it could be highly suggestive that it's just a ceremonial thing. But let's assume for a second that he did go back into Starfleet. Again, it just would make this episode even weaker in my mind, because it's an episode with no consequences, with no meaning. Mm-hmm. And, I think already I'm disappointed with this episode. That would just make me think, like, right. Well, what was the point? They did this, at least to me, the saving grace of this episode is that it is actually, there is a finality. We do get these beautiful scenes with him and his mother, and we do get some interesting scenes with him and Picard, and we get an interesting idea of what Wesley is going to become. We don't get much more food than that, but it's an interesting idea, and it's a good way to kind of but knowing now that it was intentionally done to sideline this character and to deprive this actor who loves Star Trek, mind you.
Oh, well, I don't know if it was meant like that. I just think the producers
it's a consequence. I kind of could understand why Will Wheaton was so angry for a long time, if he ever was. That is kind of an outrageous thing to do. Just why would you finalize my, well, at least they didn't kill him, but there is
true enough.
The door, so to speak, was
left
closed, open. But
right.
Yeah.
So let's close the door on this, and go ahead.
My rating for this episode is, and this is a really, really tough thing to do because, like I said, there are so many little things that I like about it, but I have to give it a 5.
That is torturously low for you. My God. You might as well just banish this episode from the canon. Wow, a 5.
A 5.
Now, a 5, that's what a 5 for you is. A 5 for me is just about average. It's okay. This is below average. So I'm going lower, and I'm gonna give it a 3.
You know what, Doctor? I'm going to give it a 4.5 because you're absolutely right. I think my complaints do outweigh the things I like about this episode, and so you're right. It is below average, and a 5 is in fact average. So 4.5 for me.
It's disappointing. It's we say this with a heavy heart because we really wanted to like it more than we did. But
my memory of it wasn't as vehemently upsetting because there again, like I think what I was left with was like, oh yeah, this is a cool episode because it's the episode where Wesley transcends, but that's not really the point of the like that doesn't come through.
no.
That final sentiment is something I created. It's not something that I think that's conveyed.
Yeah, you're right.
All right, wow, that's. This was an interesting discussion. Audience, if you made it this far, we really appreciate you sticking around for the last 70 some odd minutes there. We would love to know what you think of this episode and give us your thoughts in the comments below. And also, as always, we are still in the time of COVID-19, and I hope you are all out there safe and sound and healthy, and that you're distracted for a little while from all the real-life horrors by the horror that is Starfleet Boy. Anything you got to promote? Oh, there is something I'd like to promote locally for our audiences here in Miami. There's a, and I think the Doctor, this goes to you as well, speaks for you as well. The Coral Gables Art Cinema, which is located in Coral Gables, Florida, has their, as most nonprofit, very lean entities are suffering during this time, especially movie theaters, which rely on people being socially close in proximity, and so anyways, they are closed and they can't do showings, but they are doing virtual showings. So if you're around, please check out one of those virtual showings. I don't know what the next one is. I meant to look it up, but there's a lot of good things on the roster, so check that out. And,
so it's a really inventive way of keeping operations going, and of course the virtual showings, the proceeds go towards maintaining the Coral Gables Art Cinema open.
And if it's not your thing to watch a movie virtually, then consider donating, because you can always just donate to the Coral Gables Art Cinema. So I wanted to make sure. I meant to give that plug last time, but I told casual and informal.
Very casual, very informal.
Anything else, Doctor, before we say goodbye?
The Rolling Stones have a new song, and it's awesome.
Oh, I can't wait to listen to it.
It's great.
Anyways, live long and prosper, and we'll see you next time.